I sat her down and I looked her in the eyes and I said, Mommy will never drink again. I give you my word. She said it was to this day the best day of her life.
You've been sober 6 years almost in April.
Yes, April 21st, 2019. I have it tattooed on the side of my chest.
Really?
Yeah, I got that. I think it was 5 years sober, which in the medical world, 5 years is long-term sobriety. So I wanted to do something big to celebrate that. But yeah, just the date on my chest. It's a date I will never forget.
Oh, that's awesome. You just want to show us?
Yeah.
Just joking.
Yeah, right? I'll send you a picture.
Okay. That's cool. I never even thought about that. I guess people do that, but that's really cool.
Yeah. Some people have little concern over doing something like that because it's permanent. But for me, like it was like I had to. Like I knew I had to put it on my body at some point in my life. So
Well, it's permanent, right?
yeah, exactly.
So you are in the medical field. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm a family nurse practitioner. I helped open my own practice last year. So we
Awesome.
see internal medicine, geriatrics, family medicine, so ages 16 to 104. I'm like the mental health girl here. So I see a lot of mental health patients. I'm not a psychiatrist or what's called a like psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I'm just family, but I have a deep passion for mental health and addiction. So I do see a lot of those patients myself.
That's exciting. When so you've got quite a few years under your belt. What led you to sobriety?
That's a great and a loaded question. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're going way back to my childhood, I struggled with perfectionism. I think there was this like need to just be perfect. I'm come from a very successful family. I'm the youngest of 5 children. And I think I just had a lot to prove to myself and a lot to prove to everyone else that I was mature and that, I was the smart one in the class. When reality, perfectionism it should never be the goal. To be perfect is to be non-human.
Right.
And I also think perfectionism is shame-based and it comes from a place of insecurity and it's driven by shame. So, I know that now that I turned 40, but as a child, you don't know. You're just struggling with these emotions, these big emotions. And, I didn't really develop healthy coping skills. We moved around a lot. So I grew up moving all over. My dad was in the Air Force. We lived overseas for a few years in Mexico. And, my parents got divorced and I struggled even more with, finding my identity. I had an eating disorder, like a pretty severe one for multiple years, which that can correlate with alcohol use disorder. Those two you see a lot of parallels in as women age up. So yeah, I mean, I was a college athlete, had a lot of pressure on myself to perform. And so I was like the girl that was like sitting front in the class, getting good grades. And then on the weekend, I was like this party girl. It was like a dichotomy, right? It's like two separate lives. I think, it was like this need to control with the eating disorder. And then the alcohol use was like, let's let go. Let's be reckless,
Yeah.
the duality of it. But, fast forward a little bit, I got married quite young, had a baby at 24, and I had postpartum anxiety really bad, different from postpartum depression. I wasn't sad. I was just like wound up and found mommy wine culture.
Yeah.
Over time, I'm sure you know all about that. You've probably heard that a million times.
Part of it.
Very popular, especially 10 years ago. But anyway, I think I didn't have what you would call, I mean, alcohol use disorder is so much on a spectrum. So everyone's picture of how their relationship with alcohol looks so different. I wasn't, out driving. I didn't get DUIs. There was no impact on my job. Nothing like that happened. I, was a labor and delivery nurse at the time and, did not drink any time around my job. But on my days off, I would have these binge drinking episodes. So it was like good for part of the week and then raging. And, over, multiple years, that type of behavior just got worse. Add in the loss of my father, who I was really close to. Again, not having healthy coping skills, a lot of trouble in my marriage. We had been married for 16 years and just, it kind of grew apart. And we're raising these 3 kids. And anyway, 6 months before I stopped drinking, I went to Europe and on like a vacation. And I learned I was having really bad hangovers. I was in my 30s and I don't know if you experienced really bad hangovers in
Oh,
your
yeah.
30s,
Yeah.
like the debilitating ones, you
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about? You can't get out of bed. But if you're gallivanting around Europe, you have to get out of bed, right? So I learned the very dangerous habit of drink in the morning, and I
Hair of
drank
the
for 10
dog.
days straight. Yeah, yeah, yes, ma'am. That's exactly what it was. Hair of the dog. So I unfortunately had a really bad experience in Italy my last few days because I had been drunk for 10 days and I had very scary physical symptoms. This was the first time I ever had physical symptoms from my drinking, tremors, impending doom, panic attacks, like terrifying experience. And then I brought that behavior back home to my everyday life. Well, if I'm hungover, if you had that drink in the morning, you can just keep going. And so then I started to have some consequences from my drinking, missing work. My kids were starting to notice, which was really embarrassing. I had a lot of shame around that. Fast forward to April 21st, I'd been on like a 3-day bender. It was Easter. I woke up and had just horrible, intrusive, suicidal thoughts because I couldn't fix it. So I would set these goals for myself like, okay, if you stop, don't drink on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then that you can fix this. Just moderate. I'm sure you've heard this before. But, I would fail at every single goal or limit I would put for myself. And so what happened is I had no confidence in myself. I had no agency over my life. I was a failure, complete failure. And that was my identity. I had no control over anything. I had lost everything. This is the voice in my head telling me this. I think the greatest competition in our life is in between our ears.
Right.
But I woke up and I had never had suicidal thoughts, and it really scared me. I stood up and just fell. Like, I think I had a spiritual awakening that day. I fell to my knees and I begged God to save me. I was not religious at the time at all. I did not grow up with religion in my household. And for whatever reason, I just surrendered. I surrendered physically, spiritually, mentally. I mean, I surrendered my ego and I never drank again after that day.
Holy smokes, that gives me goosebumps. Like, you are this, like, third one that I literally just talked to. Like, I've had 3 back to back, and all of you said as soon as you dropped to your knees and surrendered to God, it was over.
It's very powerful,
Very.
especially from someone that didn't have any knowledge of, religion or what God could do in your life. Yeah, I mean, it is the most powerful moment of my life to this day.
And so was that when everything started turning around?
I would say that was chapter 2.
Chapter 2,
So
okay.
I still had to do a lot of work. I never had the desire to drink to this day. I still don't. But what I struggle with even now, almost 6 years sober, is, dealing with emotions that I don't want to deal with.
Right.
There's times I want to escape and I wish that had like a little lever that could turn off an emotion, but we don't have that. So I've learned healthy coping skills over the last year, and also like what we resist persists, what we feel we heal. So I've learned to like literally just sit and feel your emotion rather than constantly trying to escape them.
Well, and I feel like those of us that have drank for so many years, we just never felt our emotions. So when we stop drinking, we have to freaking feel those emotions, which then we start to heal. And I don't think a lot of people actually realize, like, you're not going to heal while you're still drinking. You have to let the bottle go so you can feel, so you can heal.
Exactly. Yeah.
It
You can't keep
sucks.
numbing out. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. You can't keep numbing out. And the beauty of it is when you realize that and you realize you can take in the whole world sober, it's actually beautiful and it's a gift. It's like a unique superpower to be sober.
It definitely is a superpower.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like a life hack.
it is, and I wish more people would realize this. And you're not. And I don't know if you were like me, but I didn't realize I had. Well, I guess I didn't realize I had a problem until I quit drinking.
Mhm.
And
Right.
then all these things, and I keep hearing stories, and I'm like, holy crap! Like, we are all literally, we all resonate so much. We all have something in common. All of our stories are different, but getting there, it looks different for all of us. I don't know. It's just alcohol sucks.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about. It's like the boiling point, like the boiling point of water. We all come to a boiling point in terms of our alcohol use disorder in different ways, but we all get to a point where it just like we cannot live like that anymore. Like we're
Right.
unable to keep going, whatever got us there, but we're unable to keep going in those same ways.
Yeah, exactly. And then like all the like chaos that comes through those years, how many relationships were broken, and just, I mean, are you and your husband still together?
No, we actually divorced last year. That was interesting to navigate that sober. And, I wish the best for him. We're learning to co parent in that whole world. Married for 16 years. That was a long time in my life. And, it's been interesting, moving forward, dating sober, all of that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our issues were because of our drinking back then. So,
I think alcohol really destroys relationships, and um those of us, or those of us that can like push through, like that's great, but I mean, it's really hard coming together sober after you've only been drunk together for so many years.
yeah, I mean, I think in terms of my relationship with my ex-husband, our foundation was so cracked, I couldn't rebuild a relationship on a cracked foundation. But, that's just how things work. And I think when you have children, it's not necessarily the divorce that breaks them, it's how the parents react to the divorce. So it's
Right.
been really important for us to co-parent really well.
Good for you. I think, yeah, I had a podcast with somebody else, and co-parenting is definitely key to not having traumatized children through divorce.
Yeah, exactly. Because your emotions can get involved, especially if you've been with someone for so long. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope that you are okay with the decision, and it sounds like dating sober.
Yes, yes. I have found a new man that's also sober, and he's amazing. And, it's interesting because I knew him when I was younger, and then we reconnected, later in life. So it's an act two for sure. That's what we call this. This is act two of my life. So,
Act 2. So,
yeah.
I know, like, so many people question how to date sober. Um, what have been some of the hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people drink. So, it's different. It's countercultural for a person not to. It's interesting. The guy that I'm dating down now, I had a lot of swipe ups and DMs in my inbox when I was a single woman, flooded, right? Most girls do. And what he said to me, though, was, that you do a lot of cool stuff. You're an athlete, you're a nurse practitioner, but my favorite thing about you is that you're sober. I think that's badass. If am I allowed to cuss on here?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love
Okay.
that.
Yeah, and so that really it surprised me, and it made me look at him differently that he would even acknowledge that, because most people won't even talk to you about your sobriety, especially if they're drinking, because if they have their own bias or prejudice against it, it's something that makes them uncomfortable.
Right. I think that's the problem. Oh, I don't know how to say this without I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable,
Yeah.
our sobriety.
It holds a mirror up to them for them to have to look at their own relationship with alcohol, and that can be scary for some people.
For sure. For sure. So, it sounds like, you're a little badass.
Oh,
I love when people call us badasses for being sober. I'm like,
uh,
"Oh, I'm not a badass for chugging that beer anymore. I'm a
yeah.
badass for being sober."
Yeah, I've had to really reframe it in my mind. I think that has been what's given me long-lasting sobriety is, like, instead of seeing it like a scarlet letter on my chest that I'm, in recovery from alcohol, but, like, I'm a badass because I don't need alcohol to be at this party or to be funny or to be pretty or to be interesting.
Yeah,
I don't need anything. And it's not coming from a place of I'm better than, it's coming from I had to go through a lot to get here to realize that.
yeah. And alcohol for women, it like, eh, we're told that it makes us more confident and sexy and cool, but it's more empowering for us to do that without alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when you're drinking, you're inauthentic to yourself, right?
Right.
Because you're becoming an altered version of yourself. So, if you end up getting in a relationship where you're drinking, you're not even connected as your true identity. You're like an altered
Right.
version of of who you actually are. And then when you're sober, you're two completely different people. So
Wow. Yeah. So true. So being in the nursing world, how long have you been a nurse?
I've been a nurse. Gosh, I graduated in 2012. So I was a labor and delivery nurse for 10 years during COVID. That was crazy. And then I went to graduate school when I was 1 month sober, which was wild. But, I went through an experience where, I really had this fire to help people like me, medical professionals that deal with addiction or just people in general struggling with anxiety. Cause I think that was like my main problem. A lot of times with drinking, it's not necessarily the drink that's the problem. It's the reason why we're drinking. Like we have some maladaptive, coping skills. So we got to figure that out. So yeah, I went to school and I've been a nurse practitioner for almost 4 years now.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's been a great career move. I really enjoy this. Hospital nursing is hard because of the long shifts that you have. I mean, you're working 13 hours and COVID broke our spirit as medical, personnel, wearing the masks, which I'm totally fine for wearing a mask, but like just essentially wearing a mask for 12 hours is exhausting, and during COVID, it was interesting. Like we didn't really know what we were doing, like I, in the beginning, we didn't know if the baby was safe to be around the mom, if the mom had COVID, and there were all these rules. And we didn't know if we were going to go to work and die. It was like we became the front line as nurses and we didn't sign up for that. I mean, but we had to do it. It was our job. And I was happy and honored to stand up and fight for our country in that way. But it was a whole new world and it was terrifying.
I have several friends that are nurses. And yeah, the sounds like it was a real quote fun time to be a nurse.
Yeah, it was. Looking back, I'm proud that I did it and I got through it and I didn't quit. And, also, I think we lost a lot of empathy during COVID as medical professionals. And I was able to maintain that. And I think in medicine, that's what we need more of is empathy.
Yeah. And you did it sober. You went through
Yes.
COVID as a nurse sober.
I know. It's so funny you say that. I was talking to my friend the other day because I think if I had gone through COVID not sober, I think I would have died. I mean, that sounds really dramatic, but I know where my trajectory was headed and it was not in a good place. It was just getting worse and worse and worse by the day. So if I had to go through COVID as a nurse sober, yeah, I mean, it would have been really bad. I'm very thankful I got sober before that.
Yeah, because some of us started drinking more during COVID.
And I saw that. I definitely saw that, especially being a nurse practitioner during COVID, because I started my training in 2020. And yes, the uptick of alcohol use issues, alcoholism, hospital visits because of alcohol. I mean, 100% increase.
Maybe you could comment on this. Somebody commented on one of my videos, recent videos, because I mentioned how liquor stores were essential during COVID, and somebody commented, but gyms weren't. And somebody commented because they had to reopen the liquor stores because people were withdrawing.
Yeah. So basically, they couldn't close the liquor stores because people can die from withdrawing from alcohol if they don't withdraw slowly. So it was actually essential, which is really messed up when you think about it.
Yeah, because this whole
Yeah.
entire time, yeah. And when she wrote that comment, I was like, "What?" Never
Mhm.
even like whoop, went over my head.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's really scary when patients withdraw. I mean, there's, a CIWA score that we use to screen patients for like how much do we need to detox them? Because I'm actually able to detox a patient as a primary care provider if they aren't severe with like a benzo taper. But severe alcohol withdrawal, you can die from delirium tremens, which is basically like you can't regulate your body temperature and you have abnormal heart rhythms, or you can have seizures.
that's scary.
Very scary stuff.
I've had a couple podcasts of people describing their DTs, and it doesn't sound like something anybody would want to go through ever.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, it can even happen to young people. It's not just geriatrics that are drinking. Those type of symptoms can happen to someone who's drinking heavy in their 30s.
Oh, well, one of my it hasn't been released yet at the time of this podcast, but he's younger than me, and he went through the same thing, or he went through
Yeah.
DTs.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's wild.
It is. So let's go back to what your early drinking days. You were the party girl on the weekends, and it picked up did your drinking pick up after your kids, or where's your
Yeah, I
rock
mean,
bottoms?
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think in high school it was pretty innocent. It was more of like a curiosity and like a need to be grown up, because I was the youngest and I was the youngest in my class too, because I have a late August birthday.
Oh,
So, I just had this like, I want to be grown up and drink whatever, Zima or whatever was popular back then.
right?
Yeah, cheerleader
The
beer.
cardio.
But yeah, exactly. Cardio. Oh my God. I have so many memories with that one. But yeah, I mean, I think, I kept it pretty straight. I had to. I had, academic scholarships and athletic scholarships that people were relying on me. I think I had a big crack in my identity when my dad got sick. He was like a big part of my life, and he had a stroke and developed Alzheimer's when I was really young. And I had to help caretake for him, and it broke my heart. And
Can I
then
ask,
also,
did he drink? Did you
no,
was
no,
okay. Okay.
I did not grow up in a home with anyone that drank. My parents were sober, not like sober, they just didn't drink.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me. I've kind of analyzed that. I'm like, I don't have a family history genetically. Why was I the chosen one that had this issue? But, we could dissect that for hours. Is it nature? Is it nurtured? Is there even a gene for alcoholism? I don't think so. There's been a lot of studies on that, if there's actually a gene somewhere in there.
I think
But there's
there's a
definitely
gene to addictive personalities. I don't
correct.
necessarily think I think it's a environmental is a huge, but yeah.
I agree with that. I like how you said that. I agree. I think the genetic link is the addictive personality, not the alcohol itself.
I mean,
Because if
that's
it
a
wasn't
very
alcohol,
controversial topic, and I
yeah.
like maybe we can have another podcast on this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, so in college, I also lost like my running capabilities. I was, top of my like one state in high school, and then went to college on a D1 scholarship and was horrible. I was horrible at running. I think my partying had gotten out of hand. I'd lost my love for it, and I had a lot of I was in a bad relationship with an older man, and my dad was sick like I said, and I had really bad anxiety. I also wasn't doing great in school. I had planned on being a doctor. My dad was a physician, so I was like on this biology track, which was probably just way over my head as someone who was drinking and also trying to be an athlete. So yeah, I mean, I just like was again failing at all of these goals I had set for myself, and that big crack in my identity, it caused me to just be like, you know what, wipe it clean, move away. So I left Georgia. I moved to Montana. I didn't know anyone there, and just like started over, like a geographical
Montana?
tour. Uh-huh. Yeah, all the way from Georgia. Yeah, I
Wow.
was just picked a spot on the map and
I
said,
can
"Let's
actually
go."
picture you as a Montana girl.
I loved it. I still go back every year and ski, and I go for a recovery treat actually every
Oh.
August in Bozeman. Montana has a special place in my heart, but anyway, yeah, so I tried to move away to fix all my problems. Obviously, that did not work. Came back broke because I went out of state, and just jumped right into a relationship and a marriage and a baby, and yeah, that just all kind of spiraled. In terms of rock bottoms, I think drinking in the morning was a big rock bottom for me. For some reason, I just thought that was like a really bad alcoholic behavior, and I never thought I would do something like that. I remember I was doing laundry one morning, just household chores. I have twins. They were little at the time, 3. My oldest was 9 at the time, and I had to drink a Blue Moon just to do the laundry at 8 in the morning, and that was a huge rock bottom for me.
But
And then missing
what
work.
what made you think that you had to drink that Blue Moon in the morning? Just habit, or were you physically like dependent on it?
I was physically sick from my drinking. So I started having, like I said, in my 30s, really bad hangovers, like debilitating, nauseous, vomiting. I started having like esophageal issues. I would throw up blood. I couldn't swallow. Like I would try to eat, and I was having a stricture of my esophagus. Essentially, it can happen with alcohol use. I started to get what they call alcoholic neuropathy. So my hands were numb. Like I'd wake up and I couldn't feel my hands.
Oh.
Very scary stuff. Sometimes I would even have a little bit of a shake, which is interesting because I didn't drink every day. I was never a daily drinker. It was more of a off for 5 days, on for 3, you know.
But binging those 3?
binging those 3. And so my ultimate rock bottom was that day, April 21st, when I had been on a 3-day bender, and Easter was just a mess. I mean, I remember putting out my kids' Easter baskets at like 6 in the morning, drinking, like acting like I'm this great mom, posting it on my social media that I am this great mom, up early doing these Easter baskets. And I was a drunk mess, like disgusting. And then that whole day, I just embarrassed myself in front of my family, falling down. This is a day for the Lord, a day for my kids, and I was a disaster. And that next day was my last day. I woke up and just couldn't do it anymore.
Okay, so you found Jesus after you quit drinking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I surrendered, I started going to church again. And I definitely had to bounce around a little bit to different churches to find the right group and the right pastor, and started reading things on my own. But yeah, I mean, my faith is a lot stronger now. But it didn't happen overnight. It was a journey. My spiritual journey has been long and interesting, but it is my part of my foundation now.
Yeah, that is I think a lot of us that get sober, the majority of us, I think, are on the same path in our belief system.
I think when you're numbing out with alcohol too, you don't hear God, right? Because you're numb,
Yeah.
to so when you open up that, window of him to talk to you, I don't know, it's literally life-changing. That relationship has been.
Yeah, I agree. So what was a day in your life before you quit drinking?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, when I was younger, it was fine. I could bounce back. I was good. I could handle all the things. I mean, I could drink all night in my 20s and then bust out like a 10-mile run the next morning,
Right.
But in my 30s, I had 3 little kids to take care of and a job. And so, towards the end is where it got really scary. Before that, it was more just like 2 to 3 glasses of wine. But all of my drinking was done in the contents of my home. I was never out at a bar or anything like that, and I would isolate. So it's interesting because nobody even knew I had a drinking problem. Like nobody. No one, none of my close friends, no one in my family. I mean, my husband at the time obviously had concerns about my behavior. But yeah, I mean, I had isolated myself so no one would even see. And I think I did that on purpose because I was embarrassed about it.
Wow.
Mhm.
I think it's so some people think like, oh, I don't have a problem. I'm not out every weekend. I'm not out bar hopping. I'm not out like getting wasted places. You're getting wasted in your own house, hiding from
Mhm.
people. There's your
Mhm.
problem,
Exactly. It's the same thing. You're just in a different location.
right? It doesn't matter
Mhm.
if you're drinking a bottle of vodka at the bar, or bottle of vodka at home. Like you're
It's the
drinking the
same
bottle of
thing.
vodka.
I knew I had a red flag also, like, when I was younger and I would go out and I would party and I would come home, other people would stop drinking, like, I would continue to drink when I got
Same.
home, and
Same.
that, now looking back, was a huge red flag, that something that was writing on the wall that I can see now in retrospect, but
Yeah, don't worry about me. I'm just gonna drink this tree of mimosas and then come home and drink a 6-pack of IPAs. No big deal.
exactly.
And then wake up
Exactly.
and be like, "Who puked in the toilet?"
Yeah, right?
So, like,
I've so been there,
oh my
and then
gosh.
puke in the toilet and then be like, "Let's go get mimosas," the next
Yeah.
morning.
Oh my gosh, no joke.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So, w what was momming like before you got sober and now that you're sober?
I love that question. Vastly different. I think when I was drinking, especially towards the end, it felt like, I think when you're in that state of alcohol use disorder, you're selfish. All you can think about is your own survival.
Yep.
So, they were on the back burner, and that's horrible. And I had a lot of shame around that, as a mom, because they should always be your number one priority. And they were cared for. Had food and went to school, and I never put them in a car or any type of danger. But in terms of my love and my attention, yeah, they probably didn't get what they deserved when they were really little. And so now, when I got sober, I mean, my little ones, my twins don't even remember me drinking. They have no memory of it, which is great. It was funny the other day because have a bunch of people at my house and they were drinking wine, and someone had said that I had used to drink, and my twins were like, "What?" No way. Like, they could not understand the concept that mommy had once drank because they've never seen me drink.
How old are they
My
now?
oldest, they're 9. The twins are
Okay.
9 now. And then my oldest, she definitely remembers my drinking. She was a big part of me getting sober. So, she was the one that would start to notice my behavior and, mom, you're repeating yourself. Mom, you smell funny. Mom, why are you falling down?
Mm.
She was old enough to remember. And I remember that day that I surrendered, she got home from school that day and I sat her down and I looked her in the eyes and I said, Mommy will never drink again. I give you my word. I give you my word. And I never broke that promise to her. She actually wrote a paper about that day for her 8th grade paper. Yeah, I mean, it was a big part of her life. She said it was, to this day, the best day of her life. So
And she was 9 at the time?
she was 9 at the time. Yeah, she's 15 now and learning to drive. It's very stressful.
Oh. I think like you nailed that right on the head, like on the head, because when we're full blown abusing alcohol addicts, I know people are gonna be like, just call it addiction. Sorry. Alcohol use disorder, abusing alcohol. Um, so we are very selfish because all we care about is getting drunk. We
Mhm.
don't care about, I mean, like, yeah, our kids are fed, they're taken care of, they go to school, they have a house, they have a bed, like, they're fine, they can take care of themselves, right? But
Mhm.
they don't have us. And I
Yeah.
think that's the part looking back. Yeah, they're little and you can like recoup some of that time, but you don't get all of it back.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about presence. So, I wasn't present. I was constantly in another state of mind. And to
Right.
give them that gift of presence now, like to be fully present with them, I mean, that's priceless.
Yeah. I mean, there's many times that I wish I could go back and be like, man, I wish I could really enjoy, my 1 year old, my 2 year old, my 3 year old, my 4 year old, my 5 year old. Like, I wasn't fully present with them in those younger years. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets of drinking.
I wanna help you reframe that because I had the
Mm.
same regret. So I think the biggest gift you can give your children is the ability to overcome adversity and to show them that. So I'm very honest with my kids about, what I've been through and how I've overcome things because that right there shows them strength, mental
Yeah.
strength, resilience. I mean, it's the greatest lesson you can teach them is to be honest about what you did, honest about your failures because your failures are what slingshot you forward. So to not hide that part of your life, but to be completely open and honest
Oh,
about it. And that's a very individual decision. Not everyone's going to do that, but it was really important for me.
oh, I 100% agree. My kids are fully involved. They know exactly what I'm doing. They know why I'm doing it, and they're like, "Mommy's sober. Like I don't ever want to drink alcohol." Like they they're so proud of me, and it's like they're so
Mhm.
little and
I
they're
love
proud
that.
of me. They
Yeah.
love it. Like my daughter writes sober strong, like she'll make like pictures all the time, and they're so
Yeah.
involved in my podcast. Like, who are you talking to today? I want to watch mommy. And I'm like, oh,
That's
it's
so
like
cute. I
they
love
they
that.
learn from us, and it's like where we broke that cycle now, so they
Mhm.
can learn that sobriety is much cooler than being a drunk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How old are your kids?
Next in March, they'll be 9 and 7.
Okay. Oh, such a fun age.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because my kids have always known I'm sober. I talk about being sober all the time, but, that day I was just describing where they had people and they were drinking wine in my house. They didn't even really understand what that meant, what sober meant. So we've definitely had some really good conversations about that.
Yeah, and I think it's really good to be open with your kids, and, they're like our little minis. They're like our little best friends that we
Mhm.
are shaping to be our best friends. I mean,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
that's how I feel. I'm like, my daughter's gonna be my best friend, and my son is
Yeah.
gonna be like my little buddy for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And
I think too, like I struggled with being perfect and I think I loved my father very much, but he never let me see his imperfections and that might have fueled mine. So I think, showing your kids your imperfections because, I think that is really what inspires them. It's not, being perfect that inspires someone. It's how you deal with your imperfections that inspires someone.
I agree. So, how have you dealt with your perfectionism and Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a lifelong journey. I definitely I'm extremely driven and like goal oriented, but I've learned to like enjoy the process rather than just the goal itself. That's been new for me. And also like I think it's kind of boring to be perfect. I think the things that are wrong with us make us really interesting. So I've had to reframe that with therapy. I did therapy for the first year after I stopped drinking, and I've read a lot of books, a lot of books.
I try to tell people self-help books. Like, I understand quit lit, but read and listen to self-help books, personal development. It doesn't need to be
Yeah.
all about quitting drinking. Those those other personal development books and speakers and influencers will definitely change your brain to
Mhm.
keep you away from alcohol. You don't need to necessarily read quit lit to quit
Mhm.
drinking. Like, listen
Right.
to other positive things.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have a favorite? Like, what any of your favorite books? I'm like, I want some new ones to read.
my very first book when I started 75 Hard was Jenna Kutcher, How Are You Really? And for some
Okay.
reason that just like really, really I loved that book. And I also loved Lisa, I think I might botch her last name, Lisa Ballou, Radical Sobriety.
Okay.
Or
I
not
haven't read
Radical
one.
Sobriety. I like this Radical Sobriety. Radical Confidence.
Okay.
I was like,
All right.
I want to name a this was a while ago. I was like, I like the name. I like Radical Sobriety. Um, but
Yeah.
she's Radical Confidence by Lisa Blue, and I
I
love
love
those
that.
books.
I did 75 hard as well, and during 75 hard, part of the challenge is you have to read 10 pages. So I really started picking up my reading during that challenge as well, and I love that. I think reading is such a better way to numb out than scrolling on your phone, you know?
Yeah, I started like enjoying reading. But I've told people I'm like these books really helped me, and I'm a female, so yes, these are female books, but they just really helped implant that confidence in you. Like,
Mhm.
that BS, like, don't worry about the BS, push through it, just like, it's empowering in a way listening to these other women stories, and, it just helps you gain a little bit more confidence in yourself, realizing that, like, "Oh, I can do this."
Mhm. Yeah, I like the books that give you, like, really good tools. Some self-help books are just kind of like copy and paste and saying the same thing over and over, but a few that stood out to me were, James Clear, Atomic Habits. Have you ever read
Oh
his
my
book?
gosh, I've listened to some of it. I Okay, that's next on my list that
So good.
I had to get through this Naked Mind, and I finished 2 quit lit or like 3 quit lit books in the last 2 months. So Atomic Habits is on my list.
Loved that, and that's not a sober book, but he gives you just, like, really awesome tools to, like, apply.
Mhm.
Basically, the whole sense of the book is, like, just be 1% better every day, and
Yeah.
eventually all of that adds up, and, like, he, like, deconstructs, like, how to do habits throughout the day. I'm a big fan of, like, a morning routine, habits,
Mhm.
all of that, because everything is out of control in your life. If you can control that one thing where your effort and controls your results, I mean, that can be a catalyst for the rest of the day. I really liked, Dopamine Nation as well. Did you read that
I
one?
have not. I'm gonna write that down.
That one's
Um,
really good.
yeah.
And This Naked Mind's amazing. I mean, that's like the sober Bible. So Annie Grace is awesome. I mean, she's such a intelligent person. She comes from like a neuroscience background, and yeah, I mean, her book was phenomenal.
It was great. And, I've read, MJ DeMarco's, Fastlane Millionaire, Millionaire Fastlane, or something like that. And I feel like a lot of these books you can apply to sobriety. Like, a lot of these tips in their books you can apply to sobriety journeys.
Mhm, absolutely. Yeah, because it kinda goes back to the whole thing that drinking wasn't necessarily the problem, it was the ineffective solution.
Exactly. Um, so we didn't really exactly touch on your toolbox of how you quit.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, surrendering my ego. I think I was so proud and I had so much pride. I wasn't proud of who I had become, but I had so much pride that I was afraid to ask for help. So I think surrendering to God, asking God for help, and then also asking people for help. So I called my sister like an hour after I stood up from my knees, and she has a degree in therapy, and she talked me through it. She was like, you need to see a therapist. You need someone with a non-judgmental or, no bias, and to see your blind spots. You need to talk to someone. So I did that. I made an appointment that day to see one the next week. And then I also went to an AA meeting like later that
Oh,
week in the next town over, of course, so no one would see me. And that was really scary. Did you ever go to a meeting?
no.
Yeah, so sitting in that parking lot, convincing yourself to go in there, I mean, that took some courage, but I'm really glad that I did, and I think AA is amazing. I have some issues with it, in terms of, like, the first step. I am powerless. I really, really struggled, me personally, with that first step because I don't feel powerless around alcohol. Alcohol took so much of my power, I refuse to give it anything back, so I really struggled with that first step. And then I also struggled with the label of being an alcoholic. I don't like that. I feel like it's present tense, and
I
I'm
think
not an alcoholic. So
Mel Robbins even mentions that, and she doesn't agree with that either. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, oh yeah, it just means that we're labeled.
yeah, I didn't love that. Some people find power in that. So
Yeah.
I don't want to knock anyone
No, I
because I
agree.
think AA has transformed millions and millions of people's lives. So it definitely does some good. But I had to reframe it. And I wouldn't ever say I was an alcoholic. I would say I'm a person in recovery. I'm stubborn like that. And I refuse to say it. But yeah, I mean, I did AA. I joined an online group, Recovery Elevator. It was super awesome. I still am a part of their group now. They do amazing meetups and they have an app. They do a great job. And then I told my friends, I told like two really close friends. And they were shocked, which is so crazy, that these people in my inner circle had no idea. And then 6 months later, I decided to go full send on my Instagram that I was sober, which that was probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And I've done some scary stuff in my life because I had to tell the world I've had this big secret. I have this past that most people, because of the stigma, are going to shame me for or judge me for. But I'm going to tell you because number one, it keeps me accountable. But number two, and this is the most important one, it's going to help someone if I tell someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
That's like how my first video went, is I was like, this is terrifying. How many people are going to judge me? Everybody's going to think
Mhm.
so differently of me. But the support that I got from that one video was like, here I am today.
I think that people connect so much more with that. They connect so much more with like the bad, quote unquote bad things that you've done than the masks that we wear. Like I'm a runner, nurse practitioner. That's great, but like tell me your dirty darkest secret and that's where I'm going to connect with you.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and community is definitely huge, whether it's community for AA, rehabs, uh, online, whatever works. Community is key. And I love because you were honest, open, and willing. And I think that because that's one of the acronyms that I've learned is the HOW acronym, um, honest, open, and willing. And if you are honest, open, and willing, you will come far in your sobriety. You
I
cannot
love that.
you cannot get sober in silence. I mean, maybe you can,
Absolutely.
but let's be honest. How many of us got sober in silence and stayed sober?
I think it just furthers the shame too. And to go back to AA, which again, not trying to knock it, but the anonymous part and having to be in a church basement and not talk about it, like that just furthers the shame too. I think recovering out loud, that whole movement is awesome and we need more of that.
Yeah. I actually had somebody text me, and I don't know if he watches, he might actually watch. And he texted me, he said, "Do you know my friend Bill?" And I said, "What?" And he's like, "Oh, never mind. It's an AA term." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, they really are so anonymous, aren't they?"
Mhm.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, interesting. No, I don't know
Yeah.
your friend Bill. I know my friend
Yeah.
YouTube."
Yeah, I think, the when I came out sober on my social media, yes, it was scary, but it was worth it to me because I think telling people and having that parallel was so important to me. Like when I was getting sober, when I was thinking about getting sober, I would see people online and like their story and their, struggle with alcoholism. And that essentially gave me hope. And I think that's what people need. They need hope. They need to see that, okay, this person did it. I can do it too. And like someone like you who's doing a podcast and an advocate for mental health and recovery, like you were doing that. You know what I mean? Like I hope that you know that your work is amazing, and you need to know that what you're doing is changing people's lives and generational change. So I hope you go to bed at night knowing that you're impacting the world in a really special way.
I guess I don't really think about it like I don't realize it as much as I probably should, but I guess that's just like that lack of confidence because I feel like if I have too much confidence, then people like see it as an ego thing. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's a whole thing in my head. Like you said, in between our ears is our like worst problem.
I think though too in recovery, like you can't do this immediately when you get sober, but service work is a big part of the foundation. I think community and service work is what keeps people sober.
I agree. And like going to church and like listening to them like say like serving other people, the mission, and I was like I feel like I'm doing that. Like, I feel like
Absolutely.
I'm definitely like sharing a mission in some way. I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, you're shredding the stigma is what you're doing because there's been so much stigma. I mean, I think now in 2025 we've come a really long way. We have a lot of recovery groups online and, in person, which is amazing, and I can't wait to see how much we grow. But I mean, if you think 10 years ago, someone like me who's a nurse practitioner could have never come out and been publicly sober. It would have been a career-ending move. And now I'm able to be an advocate for my mental health and people in addiction as a medical provider, and that shows how far we've come in society, which is great.
Do you prescribe medicine to
Yeah, nurse
help
practitioners
people?
prescribe medicine. Yeah, we prescribe medicine. We can't do controlled medicine, so like Adderall, that type of thing. But I can start a patient on a benzotaper under my doctor that I work with to help them taper from an alcohol use disorder. The other thing that we cannot prescribe as a primary care provider is like naltrexone or Antabuse.
Okay.
Are you familiar with those? That
Yeah,
has to be done with the pain clinic.
okay. I that's what I was wondering if you were able to or what your thoughts are on those.
Yeah, those are 2 really interesting drugs. I mean, I've had some patients that have come back to me that we did refer them out to start them on different things like that. Naltrexone is a medicine that it's an opioid blocker, right? So when you drink alcohol, you're not going to get the same dopamine hit from it. So it conditions you over time to drink less. So technically, it's like people who want to moderate drinking. You know how that's going to end, right? Usually not well. But also too, it's also the patient has to take the medicine, right? So if they don't take it, then they can just go on a bender. So it has to be a certain type of patient that works for. And then Antabuse is a medicine that you have to be abstinent for because if you take Antabuse and drink, you'll get violently ill.
I
So
heard
they're
that
kind of
one
different.
stays in your system for 72 hours.
Correct. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually had somebody on here a couple of times who has been on those or is, I don't know if he still is, but said that he would get violently sick even after 72. I mean, because it's in his
hmm
system for 72 hours. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
So
whole thing. Like you have to take it.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think if you do those medicines in addition to other things like therapy, figuring out the why, does a patient have a co-occurring mental health disorder that's causing them to drink? You have to do it. You can't just do the medicine. You have to do other things as
You
well.
have to do the work.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what not enough people understand. Like, yeah, you quit drinking, right? Okay, that's cool. You did but to stay sober, you have to do the dirty work. Not dirty, but you
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like you have to do the nitty-gritty. You have to go to therapy. You have to really figure out your why. You have to like feel those emotions. You have to like do the hard stuff to stay sober. I mean,
Mhm.
sure, I'll set the bottle down. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't just change the behavior, you have to change your beliefs around alcohol. You have to completely deconstruct all of your beliefs that you've had about it in order to change your identity to become a person who does not drink.
Exactly. And those that just keep going back, like they'll quit for 30 days or 60 days or they'll do a year and then they go back and it's like, did you do the work or did
Right.
you just not drink? Because if you did the
Yeah.
work, maybe you'd understand why, like, why you're drinking and maybe it would help you stay away from it.
And a lot of people struggle with the relapse. That's really common in recovery. And, all of those uh, uh, going back out, field research, if you will, they're not for nothing. I mean, I think they had to learn. They had to, go through it one more time or whatever. I like to use the analogy of like pounding a stone. So you pound it, over and over and over, and you're still not changing. You're still not changing. By the 41st time you've hit the stone, it finally breaks. But all that work that you did, it added up so that the rock would break, if that makes sense. So all of those relapses weren't for nothing.
But I heard they're like 10 times harder. Annie Grace mentions it in
Yeah.
her book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you can avoid relapse, that'd be awesome. But unfortunately, a lot of people do go back out there. It's hard. I mean, someone like me who is a Pollyanna and thinks that I can fix everyone and save everyone, I struggle with that savior complex. And the reality is, most people will not get sober and stay sober. I mean, the odds and statistics are against you. And that's hard. That's hard for me to wrap my head around. But if you're able to influence a few, then that's awesome.
So you didn't, not very many people knew about your problem. So you probably didn't have any doubters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what was interesting is that when I came out sober, people were confused. They were like, "What? We thought you were like this happy little runner girl. Like we had no idea you were in the throes of addiction." But yeah, I mean, it's important to me to be honest. Like I think I was dishonest in my life for so long about a lot of things, and now I'm like everyone know all my problems. Like, just know, you know what I mean?
Open
I'm
book.
here. I'm an open book, and that has given me so much power. I've gotten so much strength and power from being an open book.
And so you surrendered one day, used your toolbox. And so what keeps you sober?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, sometimes we're motivated by we don't want to become who we used to be, but then sometimes we're just motivated because we have a fire inside of us now. I think I have a lot to prove to myself, in terms of my running and my athleticism. I failed in college at that, and now I am sober, I'm healthy. I still I haven't hit a ceiling in my athleticism. So in terms of that, that really keeps me sober, running and being an athlete. I think being a really good role model to my kids really inspires me. I gave my word to my oldest, and I would never, ever break that. And then also, I love being sober. Like I am so proud to be a sober person. I feel like it should be on my resume. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't see it as shameful. I see it as, man, I went through some shit and I got through it. And that adversity, like teaching your kids to get over that adversity, that is the biggest flex.
it really is.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people that are still struggling trying to get sober or like teeter-tottering?
Yeah. I would say, my only regret is that I wish I had done it sooner. You know, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, but I guess I would get curious about my relationship sooner than I did. You know, I like how Annie Grace talks about, how she, filmed herself drinking and started to see those behaviors. I think when you start to really analyze your drinking, what good is it doing? I think another way, like a good tool that I use sometimes with my patients is like write down all the things that you want in life and all your goals. Write it on a piece of paper. Where does alcohol fit into that? Probably nowhere. Alcohol is probably taking away from all of those goals on the piece of paper. I think it's difficult in society because alcohol is so glamorized and put on a pedestal. And so we're so influenced and conditioned to think that we need it. We need it at, events. We need it at breast cancer events. That's a whole nother topic. We
Oh,
need it. It drives me insane. It drives me insane that they
just so
serve
you
wine at
know,
breast
it's like the number one like leading cause of
of
women
breast
getting.
cancer, but yet you go to a breast cancer event and they're serving wine down your throat. And I'm like, what? This is a paradox, guys. But yeah, I mean, I think, kind of stepping back and like droning out and really getting curious about your relationship and with alcohol, is it adding to my life or is it subtracting from my life? And just kind of approaching it in that way.
So what are your next, you mentioned before we started recording that you want to start a podcast. So what are your next goals with this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm really excited about my career as a nurse practitioner. I absolutely love this job. I think when I was a labor and delivery nurse, while I was decent at it, I didn't thrive because it's so high stress. And someone that is already prone to anxiety, that was probably not the best profession for me to stick in for 10 years. I mean, it's pretty intense. It's like an ER for women. And so I getting out of that and doing this now where I can really have a relation-based type of relationship with my patients and see them for multiple years and that continuity of care. I mean, in labor and delivery, I would have this amazing experience with a patient and then never see them again, you know? So in this field that I work in now, I'm able to really have that type of special, relationship with patients, and that has been so fulfilling to me. So growing in my career as a provider in this county and, having my own business with my doctor, we've already hired 2 more mid-levels, so we're growing and it's just been awesome. So that's really exciting. In terms of, recovery, have been a part of Recovery Elevator in different, online groups, and I'm really excited about that. But I would like to start to fill my service cup as well because I haven't really been able to do that. I'd love to start my own podcast this spring. That's my next goal, to kind of be, advocate for mental health on more of a platform.
That is awesome. And just to touch on the whole labor and delivery nurse part, I loved my daughter's nurse after I had her, and I like
Yeah.
missed her when I left. I'm like, I'm never gonna
Yeah.
see her again.
It's an insane bond. I mean, I would cry when I had to tell them bye. And it's funny because sometimes I'll see patients in the grocery store and they'll come up to me and be like, "Oh my gosh." And I typically don't recognize them because they look very different when they're having a baby. But yeah, I mean, it's having a child, like I saw women at their absolute strongest points in their life. I mean, women are so strong to have babies in that way. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot about resilience in that job. I'm very thankful for my experience, but I'm glad I'm doing this now.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you completely elevated your life once you gave up alcohol.
Yeah, I did. It's funny when I got sober, I was like, I'm so, I kind of have chaotic energy. I get really excited about things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be hot, right? I'm going to be smart. My brain fog is going to go away. None of that happened. I like gained a ton of weight. I
What?
had oh my gosh, girl. I think I swapped alcohol for sugar. Yeah, I gained
Oh,
like 60 pounds. And I was fine. I was happy. Like I was just so glad I wasn't drinking anymore. So I ended up developing asthma and my running went bad again. So anyway, long story short, I've now reeled back in my nutrition. Like changing my mindset and my nutrition has been a game changer. I lost all of that weight. My running is doing great now. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because I looked around the other day, like literally looked around at my life, and I have created a whole new life for myself. And I'm really proud of that.
60 pounds.
Yeah, I would walk around with a bag of peanut butter M&Ms everywhere I went and a Coca-Cola. But I have so much grace, like, for that girl, like, I'm still so proud of her. It was almost like harm reduction, like, I had to swap one out for the other temporarily. Mine maybe lasted a few too many years, but, it's interesting. I had to approach my nutrition like I did with alcohol. I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
had to anything you do that's hard, it's like structure, discipline, and patience. So I applied that to my nutrition and it was a game changer. I basically went vegan and then now vegetarian and essentially like anti-inflammatory, changing like my cells on a cellular level, eating healthier foods, and the weight just came off.
I like that you said alcohol and nutrition because I can preach on that all day long.
Yeah.
Like, it literally they are the exact same. You have to change your mindset
Mhm.
to do better.
Yeah, it's a mindset game, a mind shift completely. And then also, like, I had to get curious about my nutrition. So, like, if I drink this Coca-Cola, ate this M&M, how do I feel after? I felt good for a minute. I got a little dopamine hit, and now I feel like shit. So
Yeah.
it was never worth it. I think too, like with my running, like learning to fuel better, that was a big thing too. Like, like I said, I had asthma, my lungs were all inflamed, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, when you can't breathe, you'll do whatever it takes. And it's funny, the hard things in my life have really come to a head because of, health issues. So I'm
So
thankful.
you you compounded 60 pounds and what was that, 2 to 3 years? How long did it take it to come off?
About a year. I would say about a year.
I think people forget
Mhm.
that. It took you that long to put it on. It's gonna take you a minute or more to get it off.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's this is another whole podcast, but, like, so many people get so frustrated with losing weight, but you didn't put it on overnight. You're not gonna lose
Right.
it overnight, just like you're not
Right.
gonna, like, be strong in your sobriety overnight. Like, it all takes freaking work.
Exactly, exactly. And I think like some of the books I read Good Energy and How Not to Die. Those really helped me reframe my nutrition. And there's so many bad food additives they add. So just trying to eat like lots of color, clean food, keep it simple. I mean, you don't have to go keto or fasting, intermittent fasting. I mean, just keep your nutrition simple, and that right there can be a game changer. But you've got to be consistent. The
Right.
consistency is where it works.
Whole other life outside of the bottle.
Yeah, and I think that people get scared because, life the duality of life is joy and suffering. It's always gonna be both, and you've gotta stop resisting that. I think it's the resistance that really messes with people. You just gotta, like, float down the river, you know?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we have to do this again.
Absolutely, I would love to. I would absolutely love to.
Yeah. And I will put your information in or your Instagram so they can find you in the description.
Sure.
Or my husband will,
Yeah.
not me. But
Yeah.
um
Absolutely, yeah. Megan Eileen 3, and then if you're in Georgia, Northeast Georgia, our practice is Northside Forsyth Family Medicine and Geriatrics.
what, sorry, repeat that.
Northside Forsyth Family Medicine and Geriatrics.
Is that the figs?
Nope, that's a scrub brand. This scrub is
Oh,
awesome. Yeah, I love this scrub line. If you're a nurse, you know exactly what figs is. All the nurses wear them, like it's like a thing.
cute. I bet like
Mhm.
well, maybe I will get to Georgia one day, and maybe when you're back up in
Yes.
Montana, or you
Yeah.
said Utah.
Yep, heading there on Thursday for a ski trip. So, yeah, I love that. I'll come see you. I'll come visit you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this with me,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
I can't wait to like
absolutely.
stay in touch with you.
Yeah, when I start my podcast, you'll have to be on it if you will. I would love
Oh,
that.
I definitely will.
Okay. Yay.
You just have to invite me.
Okay, I will.
Well, have a good night, and
Thank you.
I will talk to you soon.